Thank you everybody for joining us today for our Mental Health Matters workshop. So today is going to be focused on a little bit more on mental health, going on from last week's workshop, but this one will dive deeper into mental health for resources to help families, your kids, and then some other resources from CalHOPE that I will be sharing. We could go to the next slide. So Heriberto, I think you already introduced yourself, unless you want to go again. And then we also have Christine Flock, coordinator. I don't know if Christine, did you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Christine Flock. I'm the coordinator of MTSS. My voice.
Thank you. So you'll be speaking soon, and then Tanya Salazar, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya Salazar, and I'm one of the mental health therapists with the special education department at Twin Rivers.
And then it will be Kathleen McCarty.
Hi, I'm Kathleen McCarthy. I'm also a mental health therapist with the special education department.
Thank you, Kathleen. And like I said, I'm Joanna. I'm a program assistant with the Health Education Council. So again, thank you guys for joining us. And I think we will be starting. Oh, let me go over the agenda. So next slide. So the agenda for today, we've also, so this workshop, like I mentioned, it's called Mental Health Matters. And we just wanted to do some more focus for this month, since it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And for the agenda for today, we'll be doing an overview of Kelvin with Christine, and then we'll go into why mental health matters with Tanya and Kathleen, sharing some statistics, how parents and educators can help, some summer tips for mental wellness, warning signs to look for, and some mental health and crisis support lines. And they'll also be sharing some other mental health resources. And then I will be speaking for Health Education Council and speaking some more about CalHOPE and that resource for you guys. And we'll be ending with a Q&A. And I think we can hand it off to Christine.
Thank you. So like I said, I'm Christine Flock. I'm the coordinator of MTSS, which to you probably just sounds like an acronym. So MTSS is multi-tiered system of supports. And really what my job is to do is to look at lots of data, work with my specialists to put interventions out at sites that accompany academics, social emotional learning, and behavioral supports for students. So where does Kelvin come in? Well, in every good MTSS system, there are screeners, and screeners are giant like surveys or possible assessments that go out to certain populations of people, so families, students, staff, and we figure out where people are along the way. So I'm going to talk about Kelvin as the social emotional learning screener for Twin Rivers. Next slide. I want to talk about what Kelvin is. So I mentioned it's a screener, but the way the screener works is we have a group of people at the district who have looked at competencies in social emotional learning. And we've decided like the most essential of those and which questions are tied with them. And so Kelvin is a survey that has gone out 3 times this year as big diagnostics, and it allows us to gather data from our different stakeholders. So all students get it, all staff get it, and all families get it. And really it's to foster a positive culture for our district, for our school sites. Specifically on the sites, the teachers can see the data within their classroom. What do their kids feel in general about growth mindset or how connected they are to other adults? So it allows us to get a pulse on what's happening in individual classrooms, also what's happening at individual schools, and then in general at the district level. Next slide. So I know I mentioned that this happens 3 times, but you might have received surveys in between those 3 big ones. So we have a screener that comes out in September, a screener in January, and a screener in May. And those are the same questions with the goal of seeing growth in certain areas. In between those screeners, we have what are called pulses. And those are smaller surveys based on some of our biggest areas of need. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. Next slide. So what does the data show? Well, what we can see right off the bat is while we're trying to gain information to make our sites, our school, our district a more safe place, a more embracive community, is that we have really low participation amongst families. So the first screener, we had about 50% of our stakeholders, so families, staff and teachers and students, reply to the survey. This last time we had under 35% for all of our stakeholders. So the problem with that is there'd be some question around the data that we're getting. So we can say our biggest need is, connecting students with adults on campus, but when only 17% of families respond to that, our data set isn't super valid. So we really want to make sure that when you get those the surveys in your email or on your phone, you might have received them in text message, that you answer the questions, because really all it is to get feedback, and it's 100% anonymous. So there's nothing tied to you aside from you answered the questions, and that's it. It says like yes or no for us. Next slide. What we're also able to pull from that is our 3 highest needs for families. And so the information we got back was around substance abuse, discipline and acknowledgement, specifically that families aren't receiving positive acknowledgements when students are doing something well, and then mental health, which was specifically a lack of awareness of services. So when we get this information, we do something at the district level. It doesn't just like exist as information somewhere, just sitting there off on its own. We're actually acting based on this information. So go ahead and click next slide. So what we decided to do from that information, specifically around we didn't know, like the families didn't know where to get resources, is we wanted to include bits of how to access information in these presentations. So whether it be looking through the website or giving direct connections to the services that we are connected with, we really wanted to embed that within our FACE presentations. We've done staff and teacher professional development specifically on those positive phone calls home. So if you've gotten some more positive phone calls, likely it's because the principals at your sites have talked with their staff, and that's happening more. We also updated the mental health webpage. It was a giant different department collaboration to make that happen. And then also we've done targeted training. So specifically with that substance abuse population of 7 through 12, we had a series for families to get more information on how to support students, how to make sure that you know how to talk about drugs and substance abuse with your kids. Next slide. Now, oh, yep, there we go. So now there are some things that we need for families to do. One is to make sure that you're consenting to communication. So in the beginning of the year, you can do it at any time in the year. When you get that like sign up for communications, make sure you consent to receiving those, because if we don't get you, we can't get the information. So we really want to hear from you. The only way we can is if you first check, yes, I do want to give my feedback. The second thing is to actually answer those screener questions. So they're going to keep you on your phone and your email. You'll keep getting notified every day for that week that it's open until you answer. So some people have asked, why do I keep getting this? And the answer is just answer the questions so that we can get the information. And then you probably aren't very annoyed about getting the same text message day after day after day. We're trying to get it with purpose. The other thing you can do is talk to your kids about the screener. So they're getting it at school, specifically the older ones. They're given it a little more independently, but the littler ones a lot of their teachers will talk them through the questions to try to help them answer them. And then also ask questions. So of your specific site leaders, so your principals at your site, the teachers on your site, they can answer questions about that survey. So that should be your direct line of communication for, hey, what is this? I have a question about it. How are the results being used? If you attend like coffee and conversations, whether it's Zoom or in person, those are spaces that you have to ask more questions about what's happening with those results. Next slide. And I'm going to hand it over to Kathleen, I think, to talk about this mental health connection.
Thank you, Christine. That was a great overview. You know, the Kelvin screener is a great tool to use to assess mental health needs. And as she mentioned, there's lots of various other things our district is doing with promoting social emotional learning and positive behavioral supports in the classroom. And then the special ed department, we are also working with individual and groups of clients and families with their mental health needs. But what specifically is mental health? Mental health refers to your emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. It helps us to handle our stress and how we relate to others, the choices that we make. And there's many factors that contribute to our mental health. And basically that is our brain chemistry, our life experiences, and family history of mental health issues. It's really important that, you know, especially with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, that we stop the stigma. Mental health problems are so common, and they're so common in our littles and our teenagers, and people need to know that help is available, and that we can get better, and that there are resources available. Next slide, please. So why does mental health matter? Well, let me give you a few statistics. 1 out of every 5 people has a mental health disorder, and 50% of people with the disorder experience symptoms by the age of 14, and only 20% will ever seek treatment. The good thing about schools is that they're the ones that often are the first to assess the problems, and kids are getting mental health and social emotional, their needs met at school. The median onset for anxiety disorders is 6 years old. So, you know, we need to be aware of the signs, and we need to have early intervention so that it doesn't become a bigger problem as they develop and get older. It's interesting, there's a screener for 11 to 18-year-olds and for potential mental health issues. And since the pandemic started, and with the shutdown in March of 2020 last year, 83% of the participants screened positive for anxiety, and 91 screened positive for depression. And so, you know, that 1 out of 5 people having a mental health disorder, with the pandemic and with the underreporting and the lack of seeking services, it's probably a lot higher. The other startling statistic is suicide is the second leading cause of death in adolescents between the ages of 15 and 24. However, in the last year since COVID-19, the age range has actually lowered to 10 years of age. And that's due primarily because of the stresses of COVID, and because the children, they're younger, so they're more impulsive. So awareness is a priority. Next slide, please. Oh, one of the things I forgot to mention on the previous slide is because of COVID, and I briefly spoke on it, now more than ever, while all of us are trying to adapt to the impacts brought upon by the pandemic, we need to be aware of the signs of mental health. And this pandemic just changed our lives overnight, and it's created a lot of chaos and loss. And none of us were prepared for such an abrupt change. And it's had an effect on all of us, and especially our students. Additional stressors have been added to already highly stressful lives and households. And there's been kids and families, we've all experienced a lot of loss. Students have lost experiencing a traditional high school experience. Connection with friends and extended family members is a loss. There's been financial losses. Schedules and routines were disrupted. Our psychological needs we put on the back burner and taking care of ourselves. We neglected ourselves because we were just trying to stay in survival mode. And surveys have shown that students need more emotional support, but parents have been neglected because they need it even more. So how can parents and educators help? Well, above everything, it's really important to build a foundation on safety and relationships. Building that first, whether it's in the home, whether it's in the school, whether it's in the classroom. That connection and the relationships and developing that sense of safety when the student walks onto campus is so important. And I like the term to use connection before correction. It's building that relationship and building that safety around consistent daily routines and focusing on the relationship before correcting a child's behavior. Because when children feel really connected with us, when they feel valued and understood, they simply are more open to our influence. Because when you think of how open we are to someone who is frequently telling us what to do or what we're doing wrong or how we can improve or what we need to do to change, it tends to, we just kind of shut down. There's that disconnect. So it's really important that, especially when we come back to school in the fall, teachers are going to be primed and ready to go to build those connections and those routines, to develop that safety and to develop those safe relationships, and focus more on that even before academics, and starting off on that foundation. So there's another way to build connection and trust at home, and that could be through family meetings, which we talked about in our last session last week. Daily check-ins at dinner, modeling stress reduction techniques, helping your child move into more cooperative problem solving. And then at school, the same thing, having class meetings or daily culture building activities that build a sense of safety and to teach and practice emotional regulation skills. All of these things need to be in place before the brain is settled and calm and ready to learn. And so a good place to start after building that connection, there's a term called name it to tame it, and it's a tool to identify strong emotions and triggers. So you would start with, I think before going into that, let me just go through the agenda of this page. Developing a safety plan, having mindful apps for stress relief, being informed, and knowing the resources. So we'll be talking a little bit about each of these bullet points for the remainder of our presentation. So if you don't mind moving to the next slide. So this is just a brief summary of the connection before correction. Helps your brain be ready for feedback and to find solutions. The next slide. So the name it to tame it strategies. So name it to tame it is, basically it's identifying emotions and build upon your emotional vocabulary. So a child, in order for a child to manage their strong emotions and their strong feelings, they first need to be able to identify what it is that they're feeling. So with young children, it can be feeling face charts. We do utilize the zones of regulation in many of our schools and classrooms in the elementary level, where the child identifies what emotions that they're feeling, and they build their emotional vocabulary upon that. And then once you are able to identify that you're having a strong emotional reaction to a specific trigger, the next step is to name it or describe it. And by doing so, what happens is that you're able to access both your left brain, which is the language, the logic and reasoning side, and the right brain, which is about your emotions and feelings. And they integrate and work together. That calms the nervous system, where the brain works together, and then the child will be calm enough to be able to work on their coping skills in regulating their emotions. So next slide. So this is another tool to use. It's similar to the zones of regulation, but it's more of a thermometer. And it uses different street signs to make that easy association. So as the numbers and the colors change and go up in temperature, that signifies the intensity of our emotions rising as well. And then each zone is broken down into, like if you're in the rest area, then that means you're needing some tools to energize yourself. Or if you're in the green go zone, this is the area where we want our children to maintain. And these are some strategies to maintain them in that zone of mental wellness. And these are links that if you click on them, it takes you to the strategy and coaches the child through it. The slow zone, this is an area when you notice your anxiety or your anger or your irritation start to brew and start to build. And so you need to slow and yield. And these are some strategies to help you move back down into the green zone. So breathing or using a mind jar, a glitter jar, listening to soothing sounds. Those are some strategies. When you start moving up into orange and red, that is when you are reaching your breaking point and you flip your lid, and you definitely need strategies to get you back down to baseline. When a child is in the orange zone, the caution zone, they may need some help in deregulating. So doing some progressive muscle relaxation along with breathing, or watching a video that takes you through some body relaxation techniques. But when they get to red, that's usually when they will need an adult to step in and help them re-regulate. And there's two strategies there. This is a great tool to teach children as early as preschool, and you can still use it with kids in high school, because we all can associate it to traffic signals. And it's a great tool even as adults for us to check in with ourselves and identify, you know, where are we? Where are our feelings in our body? Do we need to take a moment to take a deep breath? And these are great strategies, not only to teach, but to also model and practice with our kids in the classroom and at home. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a list of different apps that you can get on your phone, your iPhone or your Android. You can even access some of them with the website. but these are the more popular ones, and they are they're geared for children, like Positive Penguins, elementary, and then through adulthood. And it's just, you know, a preference that you may have, but they all have great mindfulness techniques to help with anxiety or depression or anger, irritation. But those are great tools that you can have on hand with you at all times that will help you regulate as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this is just a brief overview of what we went over last week, if you joined in on our presentation last week. But just some tips to maintain mental wellness is, you know, keep, to the best of your ability, keep routines in place with kids, keeping their bedtime rituals, helping kids stay connected with their peers or other peer groups over the summer, having a balanced nutrition and exercise, moving our body, taking care of ourselves, modeling self-care for our kids, and doing stuff as a family, having family meetings to find solutions to everyday problems that come up, or having 20 minutes a day of family reading time. It's really important that kids stay on top of their reading over the summer. Having family outings and family chores, working together as a unit where everyone is contributing. It really develops a sense of responsibility. And so those are just some of the main tips that we talked about last week that you're welcome to go back and view. And next slide. And now we're going to be talking more about common disorders like anxiety and depression, and Tanya's going to take us through that.
Thanks, Kathleen. I just want to make sure that the parents know you guys will have access to this presentation afterwards, because I know there was a lot of stuff presented and a lot of good resources. Kathleen is a wealth of information and has embedded really cool websites and apps and all that stuff in her presentation on her slides. So make sure, and then we have a whole lot of other information for you coming up. We aren't going to be able to go into all of it, but make sure you have a chance to just click on some of those and check them out. So just to kind of, and not to be a downer at this point in the presentation, because there are so many things we can do to help prevent a mental health crisis, but anxiety and depression are the most common mental health problems that we see in little kids all the way through adolescence. And some of the symptoms might look a little bit like a typical ornery teenager or something, but we're going to give you some ideas about ways to distinguish between some of what's normal adolescent behavior and some of what might be something of concern. So, so on the warning signs, these are warning signs for a plethora of different mental health conditions. So feeling very sad or withdrawn for a long period of time, more than 2 weeks, for example, trying to harm or end one's life or making plans to do so. So any kind of self-injury, self-harm is something to definitely seek help for. Definitely any mention of, I don't want to be here, feeling hopeless, talk about death or preoccupation with death, any severe or out of control risk-taking behavior that causes either harm to self or others, just kind of reckless behavior. And then overwhelming fears that kind of seem sudden and out of the blue, especially if they're accompanied with any physical symptoms like a racing heart or difficulty breathing. That could be the sign of a panic attack. Any significant weight loss or gain, any description of seeing or hearing things that that no one else sees or hears, or believing things that may not be real. Pay close attention to those types of symptoms. Of course, excessive use of alcohol or drugs may be a sign that it may be just teenage experimentation, but it also could be self-medication for a deeper issue. Drastic changes in mood, behavior, personality, or sleeping habits, either not sleeping at all or sleeping all the time. Difficulty concentrating or sitting still, and intense worries or fears that interfere with the regular functioning daily activities of your child. Symptoms of bipolar disorder and other mood disorders typically begin to present themselves in adolescence. So that's why some of these are indicators that there may be something bigger going on. And while psychosis is much less common, it is important to watch out for warning signs, such as you heard the warning sign about hallucinations. So seeing, hearing, things that other people don't see or hear, or extreme fear or paranoia. Those could be beginning signs of psychosis. And the sooner that is intervened on, especially in adolescence, the much better the prognosis in adulthood. If it's not treated, it could get far worse and render somebody relatively incapacitated. Next slide. So these are just some, I'm just going to briefly go over these, some characteristics you might see of anxiety in your child. So many of our kids and us, of course, as parents and educators, the anxiety of not knowing what's going to happen next with this pandemic has been pretty overwhelming at times. So these are some basic characteristics of anxiety: irritable, heightened awareness of what's going on around them, intrusive thoughts that are stressing the child out, frequent crying or feeling stuck, like they just are paralyzed, they can't do anything, or in changes in behavior. So tired due to trouble sleeping, or bad dreams, that's common in little guys. Not eating properly or going to the bathroom more often. Kind of neediness and clinginess could be a sign of insecurity and anxiety. Somatic complaints such as stomach aches or headaches. And avoidance of anxiety-provoking situations, which could just be an adaptive trait for a child, but it also could be that if all of a sudden they stop wanting to play a certain sport, anything that they used to enjoy that now they're not interested in, could be a sign of anxiety. Next slide. And then these are characteristics of depression, which we've kind of talked about, but this is the one. Both anxiety and depression are really common and concerning and treatable. The thing that happens with depression that is a little more life-threatening is the fact that severe depression can lead to suicidal ideation, to suicidal thoughts of not wanting to be here anymore. And that is where the statistics on suicide come in. We have seen an increase in those levels of intensity of depression and suicidal thoughts over the course of the pandemic. We've had to intervene more this past year than in many, I don't know if Kathleen would agree, but I think we've had probably double the number of calls because we're part of the mental health crisis team in the district, of kids as young as elementary school all the way through high school who have had feelings of wanting to end their lives. And this is part of it is just the situation that we're in, which I'm hoping by the fall we're going to see a lot more restrictions lifted. But it's just something that as parents we can be aware of with our kids and just normalize that this hasn't been an easy year. So the depression signs are like speaking about dark or negative things, kind of having, that Eeyore rain cloud over their heads all the time. Nothing's good. There's no highs. It's all kind of lows or Another one is isolating themselves away from the family. Some of that is really normal for, especially for teenagers. This is the time in their lives when they want to separate from their parents and spend more time with their peers and connect more with their peers and their parents. But if it's pronounced and it's interfering with their functioning, if they're not showering, you notice changes in appetite or sleep habits or personal hygiene, that could be a sign that it's gotten to a point where you want to intervene. Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention, because this has happened so often with my friends who have teenagers, and then a lot of my students who are in that age group where they've started to have those feelings of I'm not worthy or life is horrible, and they, instead of outwardly expressing that depression or that anger or frustration, they will turn in on themselves. And so watch for covering up of arms and even legs during the summertime with long sleeves or long pants when it's really hot out. It could be a sign that they might be hiding places where they've cut or burned themselves, or there was a period of time when kids were using ice and salt to harm themselves. Just be aware of those things and, you know, stay in open communication with your kids about how they're feeling. Next slide. So these are some crisis intervention numbers in case your child is in a place where you are worried about them. There's the youth 24-hour crisis line, which is actually for students to call on their own. And there's a text line as well that's connected with that they can just text, because a lot of kids don't feel comfortable talking live with someone, but they will text. The Trevor Project is a crisis intervention and suicide prevention institute for LGBTQ youth, 13 to 24 years. And then the California Parent and Youth Helpline is there specifically for families. So if you are stressed out and you don't know what to do with your kid and they're driving you crazy, or you're really worried about them, this is another line you can call. And they may be able to give you further resources, but we've got some here that are local that you may be able to contact if you need to. So we'll go on to the next slide. Thank you, Heriberto. And we're going to get to the mental health website at Twin Rivers at the end, and I'll show you guys how to navigate all of this. So mental health crisis support in Sacramento, we have a mobile crisis support team. That is a team of both law enforcement and mental health specialists that go out to the home if there is a situation in which somebody is at harm of or at risk of harming themselves or someone else. This is a number that a person could call instead of 911. Now, if they don't answer, I highly recommend calling 911 in case of a crisis. This happens to be the team that includes mental health support instead of just law enforcement. And a lot of people find that to be a lot more effective. The mental health urgent care clinic is someplace where you can physically take your child if they are having an episode of severe depression or anxiety or anything else that you're concerned about. And then the Sacramento County Mental Health Treatment Center is available, and that's for all ages. So Dion, I just noticed your question, and I will get to that towards the end. And I totally get it that I have 2 teenage boys and they are a source of anxiety for me as well. So I totally understand, and we're gonna address some of that at the end. Next slide. So these are some resources that you can find online. They're specific to mental illness or mental health problems, such as depression and anxiety and other issues. So the first one I put down was Families for Depression Awareness. They actually do free webinars all the time, and they're really good. Child Mind Institute, they are totally worth checking out because they have every kind of mental health concern that you might have as a parent, and there's a whole section just for families. There's another section for educators. So in case you want to share any of this with the teachers of your children for next year, point them in this direction. But this happens to be for families helping children with anxiety. So that's a link to a list of all different types of resources that you can, and if your child's having specific anxiety symptoms, you can kind of pick through which ones are the ones that are applicable to your child. NAMI is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and it's a nonprofit made up of family members of folks with mental illness and people who are suffering from mental illness themselves. There's a Sacramento chapter, which is just right here locally, and they have a list of mental health support groups for families. And so we included a separate link for that. If it's okay, I'd love to just briefly have you click, Joanna, on the Mental Health Awareness Month presentation, just so the families can see it, and they might want to share this with their children. It is geared toward the younger ones, but you know, we all love this movie in and out, or Inside Out, excuse me. So this is a whole presentation about what is mental health. And it's not about keeping yourself from going crazy. It's about being healthy regarding your feelings and your mood and how you react in the world to others. So this is a fun presentation that you're welcome to share with your kids, and that's embedded in our presentation, and it's also accessible on the Twin Rivers website. And we can go back and look at the TRUSD mental health and wellness page, because that's what we really wanted to navigate with you. So there are so many resources here. We do not have time to go into all of them, but some of the, I think for, in relation to your question, Dion, I'm gonna have Joanna click on the prevention tab. So some of the stuff that creates anxiety for us as parents is having children who feel like they're out of control. So some of that means just a lot of self-care for ourselves, so we can react in a way that doesn't add to it and escalate the situation. So, and I'm so sorry, I am not actually the one navigating the page, so I can't scroll up and down. This is more, let's go back over to the previous, if we can just go back. If we can go to mental health services, and then we'll go into community resources. So this is how you can actually get help for your child and for yourself. So on the left, you'll see the counselor directory, and that shows you, now that granted that during the summer, those folks won't be answering the phone, but during the school year, you can always call your school counselor and they can help you access some of these other resources if it's hard to navigate. But you are also able to, so here's our PDF of all the counselor phone numbers. And then if we go back to the, so Care Solace, we just started working with this year. You can self-refer, the school can refer you, or you can refer yourself. And the website is down below under caresolace.com/TRUSD. So you as a parent can go into our website right here, click on that link, and self-refer for family therapy for your family, therapy for your kids, therapy for yourself. I personally am a big, huge fan of therapy and have been doing it on and off since I was 18, since I left my own home. It's just nice to have somebody who's paid to sit there and just listen to you and help you gain skills and coping strategies to be able to deal with the stress that comes up in life. There's also the mental health access team. If you have Medi-Cal, the mental health access team is a more direct way to access services in Sacramento. So you are welcome to click on that. And there are local agencies around Sacramento that are that they can employ who are close to home. And also during the school year, if you're having your student receive services, they can be received at the school so that you don't have to transport to appointments. And hi, Sasha. I didn't know you were here. We go way back to Wood Lake days, 20 some years ago. So without coverage, yes, and that's Care Solace actually has information about places that will accept sliding scale. One does not have to be insured in order to access those services. And there are, so I can name a few places off the top of my head in Sacramento that provide counseling services on a sliding scale, including Life Practice and the Gender Health Center. But there are others. Yeah, of course.
And then Tanya, I do want to share that in the morning and actually just before this our meeting, we sent them text reminders about the workshop, and then we also included information about Care Solace
Great.
and about the mental health access with the county as well within those messages.
Yeah, so look back at your messages if you had already pre-registered, and those will be right there for you to just click on. Thank you, Heriberto. And then if we can go back to the main mental health page, to community resources. And scroll down. Okay, so if we can do on the click to learn more on community resources, the Family and Community Engagement Department, AKA Heriberto Superman, has put together an amazing list of resources in all these different categories. Okay, so the crisis lines are all listed here. For Dion, I highly recommend utilizing that parent line if you need it. But I also highly recommend getting getting your own support. There are so many parents in the same boat, and there are parent groups, community support groups. There are all of these are right now are online because of the pandemic, so it's very easy to get with a group of folks over Zoom. The other thing I would say is to absolutely start prioritizing your own self-care, which we talked about at last week's presentation. We can, I don't know, I'm sure there's some way we can get you last week's presentation if you weren't there. And then can you go back to the SEL? Okay, so we are out of time, but there is on that same website, if you can peruse through it on your own. If we go back one more to, yeah, the social, emotional, and behavioral resources. There's a lot of supports for parents on that section of the website, things that you can use with your children at home. I hope that that's somewhat helpful, and Dion, our emails are available if you'd like to talk further. And I'll pass it over to Joanna.
Thank you, Tanya. So for the Health Education Council, today we'll be talking about the CalHOPE website, and this, together with the CalHOPE, the Health Education Council offers crisis counseling, resources, and information to help people find their way during these difficult times. And we wanted to share some information regarding CalHOPE. They have a few ways for you to reach them. There's a warm line, which is just a phone number, and this and like it's on the screen, so you guys can take it down. It connects callers to other people who have persevered through struggles with stress, anxiety, and depression, and any other emotions that are triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the peer counselors, they listen with compassion and they provide non-judgmental support and they guide you to additional resources that can give you hope and help you cope. So this page, it's mainly focused around, helping people that are with the pandemic. It had, like Kathleen had mentioned, it's affected many people. There's a lot of uh, resources are available now, and this site specifically focuses on helping you, get through the pandemic. And there's also the CalHOPE Connect line, and that line, it offers safe, secure, and culturally sensitive emotional support for all Californians who may need help and support relating to COVID-19. And there's also the Red Line, which is a peer support run program that offers phone, chat, and video chat services and trauma-informed support for urban, Indian, and tribal populations. And there's also the CalHOPE Together for Wellness site, and that has a lot of, you know, information and resources, and it's helpful, especially more for families as well. And we'll be sharing all of these resources with you, and we wanted to specifically go through the CalHOPE Connect line. So you go to the next slide. And here's just a screenshot of the homepage for CalHOPE. And like you can see, it has the tabs on the top for you to, if you wanted more information on each of those resources, the warm line, the connect line, or the red line. And you can also, there's also the phone number for you to chat by phone or the chat line. So if you can see right there where it says how Hope Connect works, that specifically is the chat line that we'll be talking about. And I am actually an agent on there, so I log in there every day. So if you ever need someone to talk to, like you can log in and you can find me, and we can connect. I can connect you to any resources or anything that you need. So it's specifically, we could go to the next slide. Yeah. So for the Connect line, you want to, that's where you can chat with someone to find support and resources. And you can also select on the population that you most identify with to chat. So, it makes it more comfortable for you to talk to whoever you would like. And there's a lot of buttons on there for you, so you can chat with someone either on the top, in the middle, or at the very bottom. There's a little chat icon, and usually if you're on the home page long enough, one of our agents or myself will pop up on the bottom where it says welcome to CalHOPE Connect, and they'll just introduce themselves, letting you know that we're here to support you with any information that you need. um, yes, it's a very great resource. And it's all, you just put in your name, your email, and it could be in any language that you would like. So the site connects you to someone that's best suited for you. Like I mentioned, for it to make it more comfortable for you. And you could really talk about anything that you want on there, and we'll find any resources for you. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so it's a confidential peer support line, and you can go on there just to browse and check it out. So that'll be the website, and then you can connect with someone on our team. So it'll be like through text as well. If you don't have access to the computer, or if you don't want to talk, you can also text with someone. And like I mentioned, you can go to the calhopeconnect.org. And then also, if in the bottom, if there's a suicide prevention hotline as well. So these are all really great resources from CalHOPE, and there's different ways for you to connect with us, through website, phone, call. So there's many ways for you to get those resources. You go to the next slide.
I'm having some issues with my mouse.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. Um, so pennsylvania.ca.gov. it'll be linked on that CalHOPE webpage for you. And there's resources for emotional support and well-being. And then there's resources, and that one is helpful for parents and having to be at home, having to work, and then take care of the kids while also having to work and so there's a lot of hotlines. There's reasons and links to behavioral and mental health services. Also, how to you can help others. So there's a lot of different resources, and it's a really great tool and webpage for you guys to check out. Aside from all these other great resources that Kathleen and Tanya and Heriberto have shared, this is a separate one, and it also has a lot of hotline numbers as well. So we definitely encourage you guys to check out that CalHOPE website and connect with someone, even if you just want to talk, like I mentioned, about anything and just any resources. They'll provide you with any local resources as well.